All right. Good morning, YouTube. It is December 13th, Sunday morning. So I got up this morning and I came out and I turned on my computer and was looking at my YouTube feeds. Wife is vacuuming, so there might be some noise in the background. Hope it's not too big of a deal. And I had a recommendation to watch Just Have a Think, which is a great channel. I like it. I think that guy's name is David. Well produced, short podcast format stories about energy issues, renewable energy, carbon, climate change, that kind of stuff. So Just Have a Think. Highly recommended. And he was doing something today about iron.
How are you?
I'm fine. You just interrupted me. See? He was doing something about iron creation and how they're trying to make that sustainable. I'm not buying it, but it's a story, right? So in the process of watching that video, I noticed something that had nothing to do with that as such, but it was interesting apart from that, which is that the iron industry is now going to try and manage their carbon footprint through a process that they're calling CCUS. And David very quickly explained that CCUS stands for carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Now, I immediately stopped. In fact, I stopped the video. I didn't even watch the rest of it. And I decided to make this video. The U in CCUS is utilization. Now, before today, a little bit of context. Before today, it was always CCS, carbon capture and storage, or carbon capture and sequestration. And if you've been in this space and paying any attention to this at all, you'll be aware that carbon capture is one of the ways industrialized civilization plans on saving itself. It plans on saving itself by going to the smokestacks, coal-fired power plants, steel mills, steel forges, cement production facilities, not concrete. That's where they mix with water, the cement, the gravel, and the sand to make the slurry that you pour into a form and it hardens. That's a concrete plant. Cement, also called Portland cement, is a product. It's a powder. You can buy it at the hardware store in a bag. And it's created through cooking limestone and other ingredients to make cement. The cooking of the limestone releases vast amounts of CO2. So I have to explain all that because people get confused about cement and concrete being the same thing, and they're not. Concrete is a product that's manufactured at the site or transported a short distance, whereas cement is manufactured in a kiln. It's cooked. So it's always been CCS, carbon capture and storage, or sequestration. Sequestration is a little bit broader term. Storage means you're going to put it in a container, you're going to pump it underground. Sequestration means you're going to do something with it where it's no longer in the gaseous phase of carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide. You're going to capture it and you're going to put it in a solid form or maybe a liquid form that is not gaseous. Whether you store it underground or put it in a tank, it's maybe even unnecessary. It's become a solid form, a brick, if you would, or a powder. And you could just spread it on the ground. You can throw it out on the dirt, whatever you want to do with it. And that's more sequestration. It's no longer in the atmosphere. It's not stored, but it is rendered into a form that it cannot escape back into the atmosphere. So carbon capture and sequestration was the kind of the term for about the last, certainly 10 years solid. I would say 10 years solid. And now, as of today, for the first time, I see the U added to CCS, utilization. This did not catch me by surprise. They're now going to utilize the carbon that they're capturing. subtle, right? Really subtle. Got to pay attention here. Follow along. I've been hearing for a few months now that they're coming up with ways, technologies, of course, to convert carbon dioxide gas into fuels. And I don't know how this process works. I'm not particularly interested in it. I don't even know if it works really well, but I suspect it does. Because today I saw a video presentation that now industry is talking about, not just carbon capture and sequestration, which is, it's gone, right? Carbon capture and utilization and sequestration. So that's a problem. That's a big ass problem. That utilization, that's really the end of the world. That's the end of the world, and that is not hyperbole at all of any kind. I now understand how the human world ends. And this message right now could not be more important. There's no way I could screw this up by overemphasizing this. This is so important. Allow me to explain. You're going to need some context. Some of this is going to blow your mind. Some of it might offend you. You might even be deeply offended. Before I tell you what I'm about to tell you, I need to tell you this. I am a scientist. I am a rational person. I have both feet in reality all the time. Okay? I don't care about people's feelings. I don't care what people want or wish for. I am not here to lie to the children about Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. Okay? I just won't do it. I'm dedicated to the truth, and I have both feet in reality all the time. Okay. Here's the problem with utilization. Another form of, you know what? My cat is meowing outside the door. It's driving me nuts. Could you just hold on for a second? I'll get to the end of the world part in a moment. Better? No? You better? You have to be on my lap? You have to be on my lap? No, she has to be on my lap. Okay, hold on. Hold on. First, I put the heating pad in my lap. Got our rituals here, okay? This is a very old cat. She can only have things a certain way. So I put my heating pad in my lap. Then I put my blanket on my lap. And I enjoy this too, by the way. It's kind of cold in the office these days. Then I let her walk onto my lap. There you go, Luna. There you go. Come on. Come on, sweetie. You can do this. All right. Good girl. This is Luna, the 14-year-old stray cat. Not very personable, not very friendly. But as she's gotten older, she's gotten mellow. Okay, so now Luna's part of the podcast. So, all right, so things that you need to know that you may find highly offensive. We'll start with trees do not sequester carbon. They don't. I hear people talking about planting trees. We're going to plant forests, trillions of trees. If you set aside the technical issue of where do you put them that isn't already city, suburb, agriculture, or existing forests, right? Or wetlands, what are you going to do? Clear the wetlands to plant trees? Or are you going to clear the trees to plant trees? So the entire planet is pretty much utilized somehow, okay, at this point. Pretty much somehow. Yeah, you can plant trees in deserts if you bring in a lot of water. Okay, the entire planet is either suitable for trees and has trees, suitable for trees but has cities, suitable for trees but has agriculture, suitable for trees but has suburbs, okay, or is not suitable for trees. So setting aside that you really can't plant trillions of trees, It doesn't even matter if you did. It wouldn't matter. Because trees don't sequester carbon. They utilize it. Trees utilize carbon. What is the difference? You say, well, trees put carbon in their tissues. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So do humans. Humans don't sequester carbon either. Okay. Life utilizes carbon. Biology speaking, I know my shit. Okay. Life utilizes carbon, does not sequester it. The period in time in Earth's history when plants, and it was only ever plants, it was never the dinosaurs. Okay, let's just get over that. The only time that this planet could sequester carbon through plants was when there were no herbivores to speak of, no fungi, nothing to eat the plants when they died. So when they died, they could be buried, they remained in the soil pretty much undisturbed, and then they became coal and oil, and in the case of algae, the huge algal mats out on the oceans, because again, nothing was eating algae. There were no whales, there were no, siphonophores, nothing. There may have been siphonophores, but there were not huge algae eaters. Okay, so the algal mat sank to the bottom of the ocean intact and became buried under sediments, as you do, and became oil and natural gas. So the coal, the oil, the natural gas was plants at a time in Earth's history when there was nothing around to eat them. So when they died, they just became part of the earth as a mineral. And we dig that mineral up now. Well, that period of time is gone. Plants now are part of a carbon cycle. And everything utilizes carbon. Okay, it goes through the cycle. There is no sequestering going on anymore. It's just cycle, 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 cycle. This is great. This is how you want it to be. This is how life on Earth works. Life works through the carbon cycle. There are other cycles too. There's a phosphorus cycle, there's a water cycle, but the carbon cycle is super critical to life on Earth. Life on Earth is a carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is the basis of life on Earth. We talk about carbon-based life. We talk about trying to find carbon-based life on other planets, okay? This is all we know. All we know is carbon-based life. Life utilizes carbon. It does not sequester it. It does not store it. It's a cycle. Carbon is so important to life on Earth, and it is so jealously used instantly. A dead bird is eaten. A dropped fruit right away rots and is consumed by the fungus and the bacteria. It is so precious that it just cycles through the system. It is precious to our industry. We discovered a long time ago that you could burn wood, right? Wow, what is this? You set fire to it, flames come off, heat. This is a miracle, right? We've always known this. We've always known that. We didn't know it was carbon at the time, but we always found carbon sources and used them for our purposes. This is utilization of carbon sources. This is not sequestration. We cycle it through, we cycle it through, we cycle it through. It goes in the air. From the air, it goes into the animals. From the animals, from the air, it goes into the plants. From the plants, it goes into the animals. From the animals and the plants, it goes back into the air. Circling, circling, circling. Being utilized. Key word here. The stored carbon resources, the coal, the oil, the natural gas, storing sunlight, were extremely important to modern, Western, and even Eastern now industrialized civilization. We could not have done this without those carbon resources. Of course, we know now that they're being released into the atmosphere, and okay, that's a problem in and of itself. But we had to dig them up, we burned them, we got the free energy out of them, the stored sunlight, we used it in all the energetic ways we use things, and now that carbon is back into the cycle, okay? So back to this CCUS thing, carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. So long as it was sequestration, that we're going to capture it at the smokestacks, capture it out of the air somehow. By the way, no one really has a plan to do these things, but that was the talk. That was the talk. We were going to pull it out of the air, pull it out of the smokestacks before it left the smokestacks. Somehow, hand wave. We were going to do these things. The intent of sequestration was that we could capture it and put it back in the ground from whence we dug it up, that we were going to reverse a process that had been extremely profitable for us. The way that we've been able to grow civilization, the absolute miraculous way we were able to transform ourselves as a species, as our level of technology, our cultural evolution has been so profoundly impacted by this that it has made us essentially gods in the universe. The pulling up the carbon and utilizing that stored sunlight kept our economy and our culture alive 24/7. We were no longer tied to the sun. We were no longer tied to the sun in the sky because we could tap the sun in the ground, stored there by plants. The importance of this, you've got to understand the importance of this. If you don't understand the importance of this, then you don't understand anything of importance. Everything you think is important is not important compared to this. That everything we've done culturally, technologically, since probably at least 6,000 years ago, when we started using wood in this fashion, until we cleared all the forest, and then we discovered the coal, which was the stored wood in the ground, right? Everything we've done of any transcendent importance was because of these carbon resources in the ground. We pulled them up, we released them in the atmosphere. Engineers came along and said, excuse me, I got to tell you something. That was a bad idea. I mean, I know it was a good idea. We all agree it's a good idea, right? Penicillin, internet, plastics, that kind of a good idea. I mean, like peak experience, good idea to get it out of the ground, utilize it, but putting it in the atmosphere is a bad idea. So the same engineers come along and say, well, scratch. Hey, here's a thought. How about we put it back in the ground? Carbon capture and sequestration. Okay? Or if you prefer, carbon capture and storage. They're not exactly synonymous, but just allow that they are synonymous. CCS actually happens to be spelled the same way, so it's kind of okay. Carbon capture and sequestration. Now, that's what plants did one time only on the earth when conditions were perfect for them to be buried in the ground and form coal, or when algal mats could form hundreds of feet thick in the oceans, which they do not do anymore, please notice, and just sink to the bottom and be buried under the sediments in the ocean to turn into oil and natural gas. You know, this went on for 300 million years. Not happening anymore. Not happening today. Just not a thing, okay? So we have to come along now and technologically do that. If we're going to pull up these resources, set them on fire, have them out in the atmosphere, and change the planet's, the Earth dynamic system, okay, starting with the atmosphere, but eventually impacting the oceans, the cryosphere, the biosphere, pretty much everything, okay, it's the Earth dynamic system. It's big, it's planetary in size, it's deep, it's from the top of the atmosphere to the bottom of the trenches, as we find out recently. It's the whole thing, okay? If we don't want to do that, then we have to reverse. We have to do what plants did 300 million years ago, for 300 million years. We have to capture the carbon to put it back in the ground. That was the plan. When the Paris Climate Accords were signed, everybody was talking about carbon capture. When the IPCC reports came out recently and had these rosy scenarios for how we can keep it to 1.5 degrees C above baseline, and maybe 2 degrees C above baseline, all those projections were based upon some kind of mythical, yet to be determined, but hey, we can figure this out, carbon capture, okay, with associated storage or sequestration. Take it out of the atmosphere, get it back in the ground. Get it out of the atmosphere, put it back in the ground. I didn't believe it. Lots of people don't believe it. James Hansen doesn't believe it. Okay. There's a lot of us that just didn't buy that. It's like hand wave. We're beyond hand waving, guys. You got to either have the technology, and it's been proven. Oh, and you really need to be ramping it up yesterday. Oh, and every nation has to do this. Oh, and you're still going to have to cut back your fossil fuel consumption, and you're not doing any of those things. And not one of them, not a single one of those things is happening right now. So people like me are saying, okay, so do it. Figure it out. Roll it out. Scale it. Get it into everybody's hands. Make it free. Whatever you figure out, just give it away. You're not doing any of this. Do it. You say you're going to do it. It's going to save us. Well, then do it. They didn't do it. Then, but they could still do it, right? They could still do it. They could spend the money, make industry adopt the practices. They could pass the laws, pass the treaties, give the technology away, give it to developing countries, force industry to use it, all right? They could still do it, so you can still have hope, right? I could be sitting here being hopeful, saying, hey, we're going to capture carbon. We're going to sequester that shit. We're going to put it in barrels. We're going to bury it under the ground. We're going to reverse, 200 years that we spent reversing 300 million years of history. We are going to now reverse our reversal of 300 million years of history. We could do that, but I have no hope. I have no hope of any kind that that's going to happen. It is not going to happen. Because today I see, thanks to the presentation at Just Have a Think, no fault of his, I just pay attention, there's a U in CCS, utilization. Now, 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, I was talking about how plants utilize carbon, animals utilize carbon, the seas absorb carbon. It's a big cycle of utilization, right? Repurposing, recycling the carbon. There's now a U in our industrial process that was supposed to capture and sequester, store carbon. Now it's CCUS, and the U is first. Here's how that happened. Totally predictable. I should have seen it coming. I guess I probably did. I was waiting to see it happen. It happened. Today it happened. I saw it happen. Predictable. Here's why. Industry goes to a great deal of expense to capture carbon. By the way, they're not doing any of that right now, but they will. Equipment, energy supplies. Where's the energy coming from? Do we have to answer that question? I guess we do. Technology, patents, licensing of technology, licensing of patents, deploying equipment, powering that equipment somehow, passing the laws, passing the regulations, working on the quality control, funding the regulatory bodies, funding all the inspections, arguing all this crap in courts. Okay, it's just all going to be fought forever. It's all this expense, all this money, and then they capture carbon. Well, fine. We went to all this trouble to capture it. Did you know this shit is really valuable? We've been pulling it out of the ground at great expense, carbon. And now we're capturing it at great expense, a great treasure. Capturing it, and now we have it. Did you know this stuff is valuable? It is. It's really valuable. Here's something else you didn't know. Once you have the carbon, you can, through chemistry, right, and the application of energy sources like solar power, nuclear power, okay, clean energy, you can take that captured carbon, add clean energy to it, and reverse engineer it back to liquid fuels. Methane, and when it's methane, then you can turn it back into fuel equivalents like kerosene, crude oil, and gasoline, right? Liquid equivalents. You can utilize that carbon. That carbon is a resource. That carbon is extremely valuable. It's very flexible at what it does. And if you can capture it, and if you have an energy source, and let's start talking about efficient renewable energy. Okay, let's just start right there. We have this carbon that we pulled out of the atmosphere. We're going to add efficient renewable energy to it. We're going to create synthetic fuels that we can then put right back in our automobile engines. There you go. Now, look what they just did. Look what they just did. They took the coal. They burned it in a coal-fired electricity power plant that has one smokestack. It goes up like this, okay? At the top of that smokestack, they put a collection tube that collects the output, puts it through a whole big expensive system with inputs of energy from whatever, solar panels, wind, nuclear, whatever. Maybe a coal-fired power plant. Wouldn't that be ironic? But somewhere. And they create a liquid fuel, which they then utilize. CCUS. Yeah. Now we're getting somewhere. They then utilize as a fuel, a liquid fuel, maybe methane, but certainly could be a synthetic liquid fuel in automobiles. But those do not have, automobiles, airplanes, trucks, boats do not have a stationary smokestack, do they? So this is now switcheroo. You were focused on coal-fired power plants, natural gas-fired power plants, emitting CO2 in the atmosphere. An engineer comes along and says, we can capture that stuff at the stationary source. And then another engineer comes along, completely separate, says, hey, you've got carbon. Wait, hold on. Before you bury that stuff in the ground, I'll buy that from you. I'll give you money. How much money did you spend capturing it? Trillions of dollars, right? Well, I'm going to give you some of that money back because I'm going to buy that carbon from you. Don't ask me what I'm going to do with it. That's my secret. My patent's pending, my stuff. You sell me the carbon, I'm going to go over here to my other plant, and I'm going to turn that carbon into fuel. Then I'm going to, you got to love capitalism, sell it. I'm going to sell it to people who are worried that they're going to have to give up fossil fuels. So now you can give up your fossil fuel, and I'm going to sell you synthetic fuel that came from carbon capture from these power plants. Now you're going to burn that stuff in your car. And since you're not a stationary source, we're not going to capture it from you, but that's okay because maybe someday we'll capture it from the atmosphere. But for now, we're just going to sell that fuel to you. You're going to burn it. And we've solved our fuel dependency problem. You did not run your car on fossil fuels that came out of the ground. You ran your car on synthetic fuels that came from a coal-fired power plant. And everybody high fives, everybody has a big party, swapping wives, the whole thing, right? And the carbon's back in the atmosphere. It didn't go away. You thought that you were going to pull this stuff out of the atmosphere or out of the smokestack and put it in the ground. And that was sort of the deal. That was how IPCC was going to balance the books. We're going to burn the carbon resources, the coal and the natural gas and the oil, and then we're going to turn on. We're going to capture it from the atmosphere and put it back in the ground where it came from. That was going to be the virtuous cycle. And it was not a utilization cycle. It was a capture and sequestration cycle. It was get it out of the atmosphere, put it in the ground for all time, like the plants did in the first place, right? Now they've inserted utilization because there's money to be made. There's money to be made. And you better understand they're going to make money at this. They are going to make the money. And that's how they're going to justify the expense of capturing it in the first place. They're going to say, oh, well, we can capture it because we can sell it. We'll sell it as a product. And why not? You know, when they cut down trees in the past, they used to burn the slash, the branches and the leaves and the sawdust. Now they capture that stuff and they make other products out of it. They make wood pellets. They make plywood and particle wood and all these other things. They use it for biofuel. They used to capture the slash and put it into power plants that would burn the wood to make electricity until they realized that that was so valuable that they started cutting down forests to burn for electricity, which was what the film Planet of the Humans was about. How they weren't satisfied just burning the slash or the waste wood. Once they had the plants running, they had to go out and cut down entire forests to burn those to get the electricity. So this is scope creep, right? You were supposed to be burning the slash and the sawdust, and now you're burning the trees, not even using the trees for anything else except for fuel, for your biofuel. And if you didn't get that out of Planet of the Humans, then you need to go back and watch that, okay? That was extremely disturbing. So they're doing the same thing here. They're saying carbon capture is going to be really expensive. Wow, we just spent all this money. And someone comes along and says, I'll buy your carbon. I'll give you a good price. And then it makes the carbon capture market feasible, right? Because now I can get a product out of it. But once it's put back into fuels and those fuels are released into the atmosphere, you didn't sequester it. It's back cycling through the atmosphere. And maybe it'll spend some time in plants, but it goes back in the atmosphere. Maybe it'll spend some time in animals, but then it goes back in the atmosphere. As long as that carbon's in the atmosphere, whatever duration, whatever amount of time it's in the atmosphere cycling through the system, it's heating the planet. because that's what carbon in the atmosphere does. That's what CO2 in the atmosphere does. It heats the planet. All right. So if you had any hope, that we were going to capture carbon and bury it in the ground, I'm here to disabuse you of that hope, because that's not what they're going to do. They're going to create a carbon marketplace, not for carbon credits, which the conservative Republicans think is going to be the end of the world. They're going to start a carbon marketplace for selling carbon as a resource, like they would sell grain or pork bellies, okay, from carbon capture. They're going to sell it, and people are going to buy it, use it to make fuels, because carbon is at the center of things like methane, CH4. You take the carbon, you add 4 hydrogens to it, you got methane, which you can now burn and get the energy back out. Where does the energy come from? Well, it came from solar, or it came from hydro, or it came from nuclear, or whatever. Let me look at the comments real quick. Green biodiesel processing of bio oil waste from restaurants, etc., going to burn. Okay, well, yeah, and the burning of the restaurant oil. So this was a thing that was actually a thing when I was young. People had discovered that you could take French fry oil from restaurants and other places, other types of oils, grease, whatnot, run it through a process. I think it was an alkaline process using lye or some other thing. Anyways, it was countertop chemistry, essentially, and you could make biofuel. And so people discovered that the French fry oil that was being sent off to the landfill was actually valuable. It was oil, right? It was just not quite the right kind of oil consistency to run through your diesel engine. So they started utilizing the French fry oil. And they were saying, of course, that, well, my diesel in my hippie bus is not coming from the ground. It's coming from the plants. I mean, this was true. So, the French fry oil, the restaurants in their oil, they would be using corn oil. They would be using safflower oil, sunflower oil, and other things to cook fast food. French fries mostly, but other things as well, donuts, stuff like that. And so it is plant oil. Now, if you set aside for a moment that those plants were raised with fossil fuels, which is true, okay? So it's to some extent, the plant oil is just a permutation on the diesel oil that was needed to plant the plants, harvest them, move the water around, move the corn or the soybeans around, whatever. If you set aside that for a moment, then the plant oil is derived from the sun. So you could make a case to some degree of personal satisfaction that you were running on sunlight, that your biodiesel came from sunlight. And that was an argument. The problem with that whole approach was, and these people ran into this right away, there's not a lot of places that generate fry oil. There's a few, but not many. And fried foods are not particularly healthy for you. We don't have huge installations of restaurants frying food. There's some, but not huge. So pretty soon, these guys who were doing biodiesel in their kitchens ran into this limitation of the supply was gone. And so far as I know right now, there may not be anybody doing that. I think that the restaurant operators have realized that the oil that they were throwing away before is actually kind of valuable. So my thought now is probably there's a whole industry that sprang up around this to collect this stuff and use it for other processes. They're not going to let kitchen chemists get away with anything here. If it's that valuable that you're willing to go to all that trouble, well, then somebody else is going to collect it, pay the restaurateurs for it, and do that on their own and sell it at a profit. You're not going to give it to you. They're going to put it back into the process. So I don't know where that whole biodiesel thing went, but even if that's still happening, and even if you can buy biodiesel, what you're doing is you're utilizing carbon. You're not sequestering it. It's part of the cycle. So maybe that corn plant did pull some carbon dioxide out of the air, put it into the corn kernels. The corn kernels got transported. The oil was extracted. The oil was used to make donuts. The collected oil at the end of the day or the week was sold to a reprocessing plant that made it into fuel, made it into biodiesel, went into a truck, it got burned, and went back in the atmosphere. So there is that virtuous cycle of the carbon coming out of the atmosphere into the plants and then back into the atmosphere after it's been utilized. But it's just a cycle, folks. It's a cycle. And it may take that carbon a year to get back into the atmosphere, but that doesn't matter in this big picture. We are now dealing with a hundreds-year-long problem. A hundreds-year-long problem. And it doesn't save you if you can pull the carbon out of the atmosphere for a year before returning it. In the big picture, in the smoothed out picture, that carbon didn't go anywhere. Yeah, for a year it was in various forms in the biosphere. It was in corn, it was in corn oil, then it was in a French fry, and then it ended up back in someone's diesel truck. So maybe for a year or two, it was out of the atmosphere, but it was still at all times, 100% of the time, part of the cycle. So this is the part that offends people. When I tell them your biodiesel is not going to save you, your carbon capture and utilization is not going to save you. These are bad practices. They may be good for you personally in your lifestyle choices that you think now you can burn diesel because it's a synthetic fuel, right, derived from some other process, either frying food or burning coal in a coal-fired power plant. It was captured and it was reutilized, and you feel great about that. But our challenge is not to feel great about this. Our challenge is not to reuse carbon over and over again. Our challenge now, and in the IPCC reports and the Paris Climate Accords, and anybody who understands the challenge and doesn't talk shit about the challenge, our challenge is to capture that carbon, bury it back in the ground. That's the challenge. Not to reutilize it and keep it going through the system. To strip it out of the system and put it back in the ground. Now, the smartest move here, the way you win this game is you don't play. The way you win at this game is you don't play. And the way we don't play this game is we leave the carbon in the ground. We stop pulling the coal out. We stop pulling the crude oil out. We start pulling in the natural gas out. We leave it in the ground. It's already in the ground. Why would you pull it out of the ground and then hope and pray that someday someone can pull it out of the atmosphere? Why would you play that game? That's a loser's game. Okay? And now, even though we have spoken, vociferously and loudly about carbon capture and sequestration, now they're saying, well, carbon, that's valuable. Why would we bury that in the ground? That's stupid. It's a valuable product. Let's turn it into synthetic oils and burn it. So now, even though our only hope was carbon capture and storage, now that's been turned on its head. Now it's carbon capture and reutilization. So even the one thing that even had a potential to make a difference, even though it's, technically not feasible and nobody wants to do it, it's going to cost money and it's going to cost time. No one wanted to do it. It was at least the right direction. Capture it from the atmosphere and store it in the ground. At least it had the virtue of being the right thing to do. Well, now that's not even going to happen. Because they've discovered that they can reutilize the carbon. So that's not going to happen. Oh, they'll capture the carbon at the smokestacks and they'll show you how wonderful the technology is, and they'll figure all this out. And then they'll say something like, and we can reutilize the carbon to make more fuels for people, and you can run on recycled carbon, and people will be so happy. And it'll be just like with the French fry oil. They'll be so happy. But you mean I can burn a fuel that's like a synthetic fuel that didn't come out of the ground? Yes, you can. Of course you can. And they'll do it. People will do it without question. So as of today, what little tiny bit of hope I had that we maybe someday would actually reverse the process that we have engaged in for 200 years, that hope is now vanished. We're not going to capture the carbon and bury it. We're going to capture the carbon and put it right back into the system. And it'll pass through your internal combustion engine first, on the way back. And maybe that's a good thing for you personally. But this was never supposed to be about what's good for you personally and your fucked up lifestyle choices, okay? Your dangerous and doomed, supposedly, need to be lifestyle choices. Your lifestyle choices that have changed the Earth dynamic system. All of our lifestyle choices have done this. Okay? And we were supposed to try and save ourselves from that. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. I mean, I figured they weren't going to even bother with carbon capture because it's so expensive. And, you know, who wants to spend money when you're trying to make money, right? I figured they just weren't going to do it. Oh, now they're going to do it all right. They're going to do carbon capture all right because they can reutilize the carbon and sell it back to people, keep them in their cars, keep them in their planes, keep them flying, driving, boating, whatever. Yeah, of course they're going to do carbon capture. No brainer. They can keep this shit show going by pretending that they're making a difference when they're not. So I don't know. I don't know where all this heads. It's not going in a healthy direction. It's going in a direction that's going to be great for capitalism and consumer culture. It's going to keep people in their cars. It's going to keep people hoping that they're doing the right thing. And it's like lying to children about Santa Claus. We probably shouldn't lie to children about Santa Claus, okay? But even if you accept that that's okay, we should not be lying to adults about carbon capture and its relationship to climate change. We should not be doing that. The only solution to global heating and the resulting climate change is to capture the carbon from the atmosphere. I mean, the real solution ultimately is leave it in the ground. But for what's already in the atmosphere, the only solution is to capture it and bury it back in the ground where it came from. You know, for about 10 years, they said, yeah, we'll do that. Oh, sure, any day now, we're going to do that. Yep. And now they're saying, yep, we're going to capture the carbon and then we're going to put it back in our cars. What? What do you think? Leave your comments in the comment section. Probably I'll respond to them. If this offended you, then you're not part of the process. If you've got wild ideas about how carbon capture and synthetic fuels is going to save us, then you don't understand the problem. You're on the Titanic after the iceberg, and you're thinking that they're going to put sticking plaster on that, and that's going to go away, and we're going to sail off into the distance. And I'm here to tell you, there's no sticking plaster for this. There's no quick fix for this. There's no fix at all for this. The thing's going down. And maybe we said, well, we will bail the boat out. Let's just try bailing it out. Let's try throwing the water back into the sea. And now they're not even doing that. They're saying, oh, yeah, that will cost us money. Yeah, but you do want to save the ship sinking, right? Well, we don't want to spend the money. Okay, fine. Then the ship's going to sink. No, it's not unicorns. Oh, okay. I'll keep my thoughts to myself. Where's the lifeboat? Does anyone see a lifeboat around here? Yeah, sounds silly to you, but I'm getting off. Okay. Because all I'm hearing is we're just going to hope that this thing works itself out. It's not going to. These kind of things don't work themselves out. So that's all I got to say. It just gets worse and worse. And it's tough. It's tough to be a scientist in this environment. It's tough to be an engineer in this environment. I'll keep doing it so long as I have something important to say, and then I'll stop. At some point, I'll stop. And then you're going to sail off into your sinking horizon in your sinking ship. Good luck.